Welcome to Never Again is Now, a podcast about anti Semitism. I am Evelyn Marcus.
And I am Phyllis Zimbler Miller.
Queers for Palestine protests for justice for Gaza. But do they really care about the people in Gaza? Or is their real objective to damage Israel? We discussed this with Gregory Angelo, president of New Tolerance Campaign in Washington, D.C. His organization fights to uphold real tolerance instead of selective tolerance in American society. He served in the past as a communication expert at the White House and the US Congress, and he's the former head of the LGBT plus log cabin Republicans. Gregory, it's great to have you on our show. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Phyllis and Evelyn. Happy to be here.
So before we discuss Queers for Palestine and the campaign you recently launched about Gaza, could you please tell us about the work of your organization, New Tolerance Campaign?
Of course, and it's interesting because I think a common misconception people have is, considering my past history with log cabin Republicans, that New Tolerance Campaign is just a new iteration of that in my career, or that we are an LGBT advocacy organization. We're not. The New Tolerance Campaign was founded to rally grassroots action to push back against institutions, very large, very powerful, very well-funded institutions that, at least in our estimation, have been corrupted over the decades. And instead of staying true to their missions and their stated values, they have swayed into the throes of partisanship and pushing things like wokeism, cancel culture, etc. Regardless of how one feels about those issues, the way New Tolerance Campaign approaches this is that woke, cancel culture, all of this, these are just symptoms of a greater problem. And unless we actually, as a people, are able to hold our institutions accountable to their stated values, we are going to continue to go down this dark path that our country has gone down over the course of, I would say, like the better part of the last 5 years, where we have seemingly lost civil discourse in the United States, where violence, actual physical violence against people with whom you have political disagreements, is something that is considered acceptable. I mean, we can talk about that later in regard to what we've seen on college campuses across the country in regard to anti-Semitism following the October 7th terrorist attack on Israeli civilians. But it is going to take grassroots action from everyday Americans to hold those institutions accountable. And so that's what we've done. So I did not start the New Tolerance Campaign. I did come on in May of 2021, a couple of months after I left the Trump White House, to be the first full-time staffer of this organization and to head not the New Tolerance Campaign's work, grassroots organizing, our communications work, so I can speak with shows like yours, and also, of course, to do the fundraising that's necessary to keep growing a nonprofit and continue to do the work that we're doing. So just to really quickly put a button on it and give you an idea of the scope of work that we have done. I mean, we have rallied grassroots action in conjunction with conservative activists like Chris Rufo, who's really been at the tip of the spear in fighting social issues that have infected corporate America. And we have worked with him on campaigns against American Express and Walmart, compelling responses from both of those companies. We have worked with student groups on college campuses that purport to support free speech, but increasingly, they are silencing conservative speech on campus and disinviting conservative speakers from just sharing their worldviews. In a particular incident that I'm very proud of, the Emory Free Speech Forum, which was a student group that was founded to just bring different perspectives to the table, was actually dechartered shortly after it was founded, because some of the guests that they were considering inviting, some students said that those names made them feel, quote unquote, unsafe. So the student group lost its charter. Well, thanks to the hundreds of messages that were sent by New Tolerance Campaign supporters across the country directly to the interim president of that school, the Emory Free Speech Forum was rechartered. by the school. So, it takes that type of work holding institutions accountable. And to date, we have rallied almost 80,000 Americans in all 50 states to be that grassroots army to push back against these institutions.
I would just
That's
like to
great.
clarify, when you say that our institution's been corrupted, what you are specifically talking about is corrupted in that free speech is no longer, in other words, the value of free speech has been corrupted. Is that in one sentence what we are talking about?
Sadly, that's just one of the things that has been corrupted. We have seen institutions like the ACLU that seems to have forgotten that the CL in its name stands for civil liberties, right? You had speaking of free speech, the ACLU was once the bastion of free speech. It didn't matter what type of speech you were promoting, even if it was the most vile speech. Their perspective was, if it is constitutional unless you are physically hurting someone else. Well, recently, in the last 5 years, the ACLU abandoned that and basically has now said that they will only take on progressive cases or cases that fight for progressive values. You have institutions like the Southern Poverty Law Center that, at least on paper, has a noble mission. And when it was founded in 1971, it had a very legitimate purpose, and that was to point out true racist organizations that were engaging in physical violence that was race-based. So clearly, we're talking about like Ku Klux Klan chapters across the United States, neo-Nazi chapters across the United States. There was a legitimate value in pointing that out and tracking it. Sadly, over the decades, the SPLC and their so-called hate map and extremist list has become a catch-all for conservative individuals and organizations that do not adhere to the current liberal orthodoxy of the day. And then we have, the media. The media purports to be this objective arbiter of truth. They've become especially partisan, I would say, ever since 2015, and Trump announced that he was running for United States president. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, we have institutions around the United States that are kind of fomenting this division within the culture. Free speech is just one of those elements that we stand up for.
Thank you, because now when you give these examples, I think our audience will better understand what we're talking about. So, Evelyn?
Yes. So, Gregory, you recently launched a campaign in which you announced you would donate $1 million to Queers for Palestine or any LGBT or other advocacy organization to host a gay pride in Gaza or the West Bank. Could you tell us more, please, about that campaign, what the objective of that is? And also, you made a video about this campaign. And could you tell us a little bit more about that as well?
I'd be more than happy to. So let me give your listeners and viewers a bit of a backstory here, because the Queers for Palestine Gay Pride Parade Challenge that NTC launched on September 16th has actually gotten a lot of traction in the media. But I don't know that the story of how it began has been shared especially widely. I am someone who I am a gay man, and I'm very open about that. I had I would actually say, the honor of flying out to Israel for an immersion trip in 2013, where I was able to see not only different parts of Israel, but I was able to spend a day in the West Bank as well. And I was able to spend a day in Sderot, which was the target of the October 7th, terrorist attack. Thankfully, it was a time when there was not that type of violence that was taking place, one of those windows. But my point is, I got to see parts of Israel that aren't necessarily on everyone's tour guide list. It's not something, parts of Israel that you're naturally predisposed to see if you're just there to kind of see the sights. So I felt, I was only there for 10 days. I realized that's a limited amount of time considering the history that's there. But I do feel like by the time I departed, I had at least a grasp on the differences that exist between the Palestinian territories and Israel, especially when it comes to human rights, women's rights, etc., but also, to put a point on it, the rights or lack thereof of gay people in the Palestinian territories. So when these, I don't even call them anti-Semitic, I call them pro-Hamas protests that erupted around college campuses across the United States in the fall of 2023 and into the spring of 2024. And I say that because, there have been, protests where, people are actually carrying banners in support of Hamas. It's not just, for the Palestinian people. And then, among those banners that we started seeing were banners for so-called queers for Palestine. And, the cognitive disconnect is something that just, frustrated me to absolutely no end. And so when June rolled around, June of 2024, I wrote an op-ed that appeared in Fox News Online called "A Pride Month Note to Queers for Palestine." And in addition to pointing out the cognitive dissonance that exists within Queers for Palestine, it's a note to them that the human rights abuses that take place within the Palestinian territories are something to stand against. The way gay people are treated in the Palestinian territories is most definitely something one can raise your voice for and fight against. But when you are someone who identifies as queer or lesbian, gay, LGBTQ, whatever, and you are waving a banner in support of Palestine, the implication being the Palestinian government, you are supporting, whether you know it or not, a regime that has had homosexuality illegal in the West Bank since 1936, where being gay in Gaza is an offense that is punishable by death. And indeed, several people have been killed fairly recently for mere suspicion of homosexuality. It is not a place that enjoys the same freedom, certainly, that we have here in the United States, if you happen to be a gay individual, but even in Israel. So I wrote this op-ed, and it led to the genesis and the germination of this idea to actually take it one step farther. And instead of just publishing an op-ed, we're really big on this at New Tolerance Campaign, translating those words into action. And so, I went around to some contacts that I have, and I was able to secure commitments for $1 million for any LGBTQ advocacy organization or any advocacy organization in the United States that's able to successfully pull off a gay pride parade in the West Bank or Gaza. It's directed at Queers for Palestine because they're the ones that seem to be most vocal, saying that, it's just as bad in the United States as it is over in the Palestinian territories. But the offer is open to any group. And here it is, just about 3 weeks later that we're recording this episode of your show. We have yet to have any takers.
Wait,
But
I need to ask another question.
Sure.
I know how, I was going to say ignorant, uneducated American young people can be about what's going on. But really, how can, okay, do I be using the word correctly? Queers in the United States really not know how they would be treated if they went to Gaza? Why? I just don't understand it. I know you called it a disconnect, but I don't get it.
Well, I guess broadly and increasingly in the United States, we have individuals who are graduating from institutions of higher education who do not have a strong grasp on world history or even current world events and the way geopolitics is structured around the globe right now in 2024. Maybe that's like a whole separate podcast that we could talk about the state of education in the United States. But I think that exists there. And second, I believe also that I'm most definitely someone who is a conservative, and I have certain feelings about this. I realize you have listeners and viewers from all different, the entire political spectrum. But I think when you look at the left, especially in the United States or even the West, I mean, Queers for Palestine has a very organized presence in London, for example. We have almost, what I call like the oppression Olympics, where, you are not actually doing something that matters unless you can claim to be part of an oppressed community, or if you, as an oppressed person, can claim solidarity with what you view as another oppressed community. And I think that's part of what's driving the Queers for Palestine movement in the United States, especially recently, where, if you look at the left in America, especially the way it has evolved in recent years, like all oppression is the same oppression. Racial oppression is the same as anti-Semitism, is the same as Islamophobia, is the same as homophobia. And we're all in this together as oppressed peoples fighting against the oppressive establishment. Like number one, that's a very divisive way of looking at the world. But number two, I think that it does a disservice to the people who have fought for racial equality in the United States, or people who have fought for religious liberty in the United States, even people who have fought for gay rights in the United States, things like same-sex marriage, all of that. I mean, those fights are different in their own way. They have their own history and their own reasons why they were started. And I think when all oppression is the same oppression, you lose that. So there's an element of that that's involved with all of that here as well.
So Evelyn, can I just clarify one thing?
Yeah.
So it's that word I really dislike, intersectionality, in which if you're fighting the oppression of A, you need to fight B, even if it's nothing to do with it, and you shouldn't be fighting that. So that's what we're talking about here, correct?
Yeah, not only that, but I think on the American left today, you're almost required to fight that fight. And if you don't fight those fights, then you will be ostracized.
Right.
Exactly.
Meaning fight against everything, not just, okay, just to clarify.
Correct. If you are a gay person who fought for same-sex marriage, but you are not raising your voice against, quote unquote, Israeli genocide right now, then you can't consider yourself truly progressive in the United States. I think that's something that drives all of this as well.
Yes.
Ladies, I also wanted to say, Evelyn, you had a moment ago hinted at the fact that we have a video at the New Tolerance Campaign that we have created to promote and continue the promotion of this Queers for Palestine Gay Pride Parade challenge. And I think it basically sums up, what I talked about a moment ago regarding the Fox News op-ed that I had written, and the way that gay Palestinians are treated and the fear in which they live day to day. It puts all of that in visual form. And I'm actually very proud to be able to say we are debuting that here on your Never Again Is Now podcast. Your viewers will be the first ones to hear it and to see it. And
we're proud
happy to show that clip right now.
We're proud of it. So we're honored.
After the brutal slaughter of more than 1,200 Israeli civilians by Hamas terrorists, LGBTQ activists have come out in full force on behalf of Hamas? Washington, New York City, Toronto, Paris, London. The one place they haven't yet appeared? Palestine. The New Tolerance Campaign wants to change that. We're offering $1 million to any American nonprofit that holds a Queers for Palestine Pride Parade in Gaza or the West Bank. Zoom into this map of the Middle East. Marked in red is every place that currently restricts or criminalizes homosexuality. In Gaza, same-sex relationships can earn you 10 years in prison, or worse. If you're gay in Gaza, you can be killed without consequence. The Hamas government killed one of their own military commanders under suspicion of being gay. In the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority has officially banned gay and trans rights organizations from holding any events. In 2019, a queer Palestinian teenager was nearly stabbed to death. West Bank police responded by promising to arrest anyone who participated in an event denouncing the violence. They called such demonstrations a violation of the ideals and values of Palestinian society. Is there anywhere in the region gay Palestinians can be safe? Yes, Israel. Right now, Israel is protecting nearly 100 gay Palestinian refugees. One of the gays who fled to Israel, Ahmad Abu Murkaya, a 25-year-old man who was afraid his family would kill him. He spent 2 years in the safety of Israel before being kidnapped and beheaded in the West Bank. So, Queers for Palestine, we invite you to step up and bring your message to the people who most need it. We're offering $1 million to any American nonprofit with the guts to host a pride parade in the Palestinian Territories. Come on, Queers for Palestine. Show the world just how inclusive Palestine can be.
Evelyn, your turn.
So, do you really have $1 million to donate if an LGBT advocacy group or another advocacy group would take up the challenge to organize a gay pride at Gaza or the West Bank?
100%. This is a sincere offer. Like I said, I was able to secure commitments for $1 million before we launched this campaign. And for anyone who doubts this, I mean, let me tell you, if I wasn't telling the truth right now and a group was to step forward, accept this challenge, and successfully hold a gay pride parade in either Gaza or the West Bank, and New Tolerance Campaign was not able to fulfill our end of this offer, it would severely damage the credibility of the organization, but also my personal credibility. I would not be with you today talking about this $1 million challenge unless it was a legitimate offer. And let me tell you, there's two things that could happen here. Number one, if we reach the conclusion of the window of time that this offer is valid, which is through the middle of March in 2025, it's a 6-month window that we had for this challenge, and no one ends up taking us up on this offer, well, then we have actually proven our point that you do not enjoy the same freedoms in the Palestinian territories if you are a gay individual that you do in Israel, the United States, or other Western countries. But let's take a step back for a minute and just think about what would happen if the nearly impossible becomes just very, very difficult. And there is actually a gay pride parade that's able to take place. What an earth-changing event that would be, especially in the Arab world. If you are able to successfully host a gay pride parade in Gaza or the West Bank, it would be a historic inflection point. It would be an inflection point not only for LGBTQ world history, but it's something that would send shockwaves, I think, through not only the Arab world but around the globe. Showing that perhaps the Palestinian governments are more inclusive than one might initially believe. I mean, either way, it's a win for New Tolerance Campaign. And I always say, we are putting our money where their mouths are. So organizations like Queers for Palestine that are happy to hold up banners that say as much, even though I've never seen a banner held up in the Middle East that says Palestine for Queers, it is nonetheless a legitimate offer, and it stands through the middle of March.
Right. It's really a remarkable campaign you have here. I think you also put billboards around or near universities where they protest Israel and support Hamas. Is that correct in the United States?
Yeah, I mean, my goodness, if we were to put mobile billboard trucks at every college and university that was marching in support of Hamas, we'd have trucks all over the country. We picked out 3 key locations, at least for the start of our campaign, where the day we launched, we had mobile billboard trucks that were circling the campus of Columbia University in New York City, the campus of UCLA in Los Angeles. Those are 2 locations that we were actually able to identify real on-the-ground Queers for Palestine activity. So universities where that faction of this pro-Hamas movement has been active and has been the most organized. So if we were going to get a response from Queers for Palestine, we figured those are two really good places to make sure that they saw our challenge. We also had a truck circling the national headquarters of the Human Rights Campaign, which, if your viewers and listeners aren't aware, is the largest and most well-funded LGBTQ advocacy organization in the United States. I mean, they have this glimmering headquarters on Rhode Island Avenue in the District of Columbia. They have an entire program that is dedicated to fighting for international LGBTQ equality. However, after the October 7th terrorist attack that killed over 1,200 Israeli civilians, the Human Rights Campaign engaged in a lot of both sidesism and said that they were disappointed in both Palestinians and in Israel. They were unable to condemn Hamas by name. And our thinking was, if the largest and most well-funded LGBTQ organization in the United States isn't able to step up and accept this challenge, who would? So we wanted to make sure that they were aware of this as well. So for several days, we had those trucks circulating around those locations, and it helped our campaign to go viral. We had men and women on the street, at UCLA and in New York and in DC, who were, posting on X, formerly Twitter, these trucks that they were seeing. We definitely wanted to get the word out here. And clearly, I will also say that this campaign is meant to be provocative. It is meant to be something that puts me in front of audiences like yours and draws attention to this. Because I think for so long, Queers for Palestine is nothing new. But I think before our campaign, people would just hear it and either scratch their head or roll their eyes and say, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe that." Well, I don't think anyone has truly called out the hypocrisy of an organization like Queers for Palestine, or the hypocrisy that we are seeing from establishment LGBTQ institutions. There's that word again, in the United States. Who I would say, at least via their missions, have an obligation to be standing up for the rights of gay Palestinians more than they have. So this campaign is meant to get attention, but the more important thing is it is meant to drive home a very important human rights message, one that I think is being neglected as we talk about the strife that's happening right now in the Palestinian Territories and in the greater Middle East.
Mm-hmm. Are Queers for Palestine, as you said, it's been around before now. Would you consider it an anti-Semitic group from the start?
I'm reluctant to go that far. Because Queers for Palestine is not organized in the traditional sense, right? There is no national headquarters for Queers for Palestine. There is no chapter structure. I can't send an email to the national president of Queers for Palestine requesting a meeting. Queers for Palestine is, at least in the United States, is something that is more of this idea. And if you are someone who identifies as part of the LGBTQ community, or I guess Q, right? Queers is for Q. Then you just decide to take up a banner that says Queers for Palestine, no one's going to stop you. You're not infringing on anyone's copyright. You're able to do that. So, I'm not willing to say that any and everyone that's carrying that banner of Queers for Palestine is anti-Semitic. But most definitely there are people within Queers for Palestine who are, and I'm willing to certainly say that. If you are someone who is waving a transgender flag or carrying a Queers for Palestine banner and you're marching in the same parade as people who are calling for the destruction of Israel and saying that Israel is committing a genocide, I think it is fair to lump you in together with other anti-Semitic organizations. But when it comes to the way Queers for Palestine is structured in the United States, there really isn't one. But that hasn't stopped people from gathering and organizing under that banner, just in disparate parts of the country. And as I said earlier, interestingly enough, London has a very organized and very active group. Again, I don't know like how structured they are, but they have a very active social media presence, and they're most definitely out there organizing protests and various actions, in support of Hamas and their actions.
Yeah. So, do you know if they, in any way, are worried about what would happen to themselves if they would get into the hands of Hamas?
I don't know that most people who are marching as Queers for Palestine or in support of Queers for Palestine truly comprehend what it's like on the ground and what the actual legal landscape is. Furthermore, I don't think they comprehend the cultural landscape there. I mean, let's say, you're able to, hide your sexual orientation successfully from the police or from the government. Honor killings are something that we see with a sad frequency, not only in the Palestinian territories, but across the Middle East, where a family finds out that they say have a son who is gay or who has homosexual tendencies. Well, one afternoon, father will take them up, the side of a mountain, and only the father comes down. Um, yeah, again, our campaign is meant to drive home, at least to audiences that may not be aware the fact that Palestinian territories are not a good place for gay people to be. Certainly, there's much more freedom one can enjoy in Israel. And actually, I mean, Israel takes in gay Palestinian refugees, frequently. And there are, I believe, well over 100 gay Palestinian refugees currently within Israel as we speak. And I think that alone should give you an idea of the difference, the way pluralism exists in one but not in the other. And I think folks on the conservative side are well aware of the disparity in human rights between those two regions. But I think it's important that we break through to this very young, very vocal, very active, very ignorant group of pro-Hamas protesters that we have seen emerge over the course of the last year or so, because unless we break through to them, they might not hear this message otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what has the effect been so far of your campaign? We're 3 weeks in now, right?
Yep, 3 weeks in, I can tell you that the support that we've gotten from people in the conservative movement has been very broad and very loud. But we've also gotten a lot of support from mainstream media as well. It was actually Fox News that ran an exclusive story that launched our campaign. But even I had no idea that just a couple of days later, the New York Post editorial board would write a piece endorsing our campaign. They didn't even give me a heads up about it. I didn't know it was coming. We didn't ask for it. But I got a Google alert one afternoon shortly after we launched the campaign that said they were, running this, that said they had run this story talking about the importance of our campaign, and how it was basically high time someone did this and actually called out the hypocrisy that we see, not just among Queers for Palestine, but again, but among many of these protesters that we have seen across the country, but especially on college campuses over the course of the last year. We have gotten some interest. I think maybe like people like maybe dipping their toes in the water or just emailing New Tolerance Campaign and seeing if we are for real, asking for additional information. There was one person who emailed us and said, can you give me dates that New Tolerance Campaign would be able to come and film the parade if we're able to organize it? That's one of the stipulations that we have. And I replied, we are more than happy to build our film crew schedule around yours. And let me tell you, if you are hosting a gay pride parade in Gaza or the West Bank, we will drop everything and find a way to be there to film it. Never heard back from that person again. And that's kind of been the feedback that we've gotten so far is, there have been a handful of individuals, and, this offer is open to any organization, but there have been a handful of individuals that have reached out, and I think, they were either trying to see if we were trolling, which we're not, or, what the steps might be in order to, take the next step in terms of actually realizing this gay pride parade. And, thus far we have yet to find any takers.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah.
As we're coming to the end of this show, I think Evelyn has one more question. And then, Greg, we're going to give you, if you have last thoughts, if there was something that we didn't cover. But Evelyn, did you want to ask one more question?
Yes. So, Gregory, what would you advise to our individual listeners who would like to do something for gays in Gaza or against the hypocrisy of radical anti-Zionist groups like Queers for Palestine?
Well, I'm very glad you asked that question because, as I said earlier, we are not a think tank. we're a do tank at the New
I
Tolerance
love that.
Campaign. And we want to empower anyone who, say, for example, watches this podcast or listens to this podcast and has this energy that they want to use in order to affect some sort of change. We give you something you can do other than shake your fist at the sky. So your listeners can go to newtolerance.org, our website, right now on your phone or on your laptop, tablet, whatever. You'll see a banner that says Queers for Palestine $1 million challenge. If you click on that, there's a portal that you'll see in which you can send an email just with a couple of clicks to the heads of the major LGBTQ advocacy organizations in the United States, not only asking them to accept the New Tolerance Campaign Queers for Palestine challenge, but also to just be more full-throated in support of gay individuals, both in Palestine and in Israel, but also to condemn Hamas for the atrocities that they have executed. And you don't use that term lightly. Another thing that your listeners can do, we've created a resource at the New Tolerance Campaign that we just launched at the beginning of August, hatemap.com. Earlier in our talk, I talked about the Southern Poverty Law Center and how its so-called hate list is something that was once objective, but now has been skewed entirely to the right. And if you are someone that doesn't know better, you would go to the SPLC's website and think hate in the United States and violent extremism is exclusively the purview of the right. Well, it's not. And before us, no one was actually tracking hate and violence on the left. So you can go to hatemap.com or just to our website. And we have everything geographically mapped out. You can look at your part of the country. We're only in the United States for now. And you can see, which groups, hate groups, are operating in your neck of the woods. And I don't use that word lightly. Unlike the SPLC, we have a very high threshold for what we call hate, and that is advocating for physical violence against those with whom you have political disagreements. You're advocating for it, or you're directly engaging in it. And I point this out because there are a significant contingent of anti-Semitic organizations and anti-faith organizations that are on that list. And these are not people that are just holding protests on college campuses. These are like groups like Students for Justice in Palestine that were literally hunting down Jewish students at Cooper Union in New York City, trying to attack them. The students had to barricade themselves in a library to avoid being physically attacked. Groups like the Answer Coalition, which stormed Union Station in Washington, D.C., and actually beat up a Capitol police officer here. So, I just point this out to say, the right is not perfect, but there's hate and really extreme anti-Semitism that exists on the American left. And our hate map tracks it and catalogs it and actually maps it across the United States. So you can visit that, use it as a resource, and share it.
That's
We
great.
have talked here about how the political spectrum, when it comes to anti-Semitism, comes like this, like straight
The
lines.
horseshoe. Yeah, they call it the horseshoe, right?
Yes. So, Gregory, this has been wonderful. Is there anything else that you really want to say briefly? I mean, you've shared so much important information with us. Is there anything?
I'm really glad that you gave me an opportunity to talk about the work that we're doing at New Tolerance Campaign, not just in support of free speech and not just fighting anti-Semitism, but a lot of the greater work that we're doing. It's a big fight to push back against the institutions. As I said, they're very large, very powerful, very well funded. But this is a hill that I am not willing to give up. I truly feel that if we're able to rally significant grassroots pushback, we will be able to bring our country back to a place of true tolerance, of new tolerance, if you will. So I would just encourage people, if you like what you've heard today, go to our website, newtolerance.org. You can add your email to our list or participate in one of the campaigns that we have up right now. You can go to hatemap.com, or you can follow us on social media on X at @new_tolerance. You can find us on Facebook. Just search for New Tolerance Campaign. We also have a YouTube and Rumble channel. You can just search for New Tolerance Campaign and you'll find us there. Thank you very much for having me today. And very glad to be able to debut that video on your show.
Excellent.
And we are very happy that you premiere it on our show.
Yes, that you give us the opportunity. So thank you again. Thank our listeners. For those of you who would like to know more about Evelyn and myself and our work, you can go to Never Again Is Now podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And please, as we end every podcast, we say, speak up against anti-Semitism and all hate.